Hello, everybody. I'm Logan Crawford, and this is the award-winning TV talk show right here on Ebru Fresh Outlook. The U.S. Central Command, responsible for U.S. security interests in more than 20 nations, claims to be hacked by ISIS sympathizers. Its YouTube and Twitter accounts taken over, with warnings posted, for example, for U.S. soldiers to watch their backs. Take a look.
This was the YouTube page of the U.S. Central Command after it and Central Command's Twitter accounts appeared hacked by people claiming to be sympathizers of the Islamic State. Both accounts have been suspended, but not before the hackers were able to put 2 videos on the YouTube page and post these kinds of messages on the Twitter feed. The Twitter account also published a list of U.S. generals and addresses associated with them. One of the messages told American soldiers to watch your back. White House spokesperson Josh Earnest played down the incident with reporters.
I can tell you this is something that we're obviously looking into and something that we take seriously. However, just a note of caution to folks as they're covering this story. There's a pretty significant difference between what is a large data breach and the hacking of a Twitter account.
U.S. defense officials tell Reuters that the images on the CENTCOM Twitter feed don't appear to pose any security threat or include classified information. The apparent infiltration comes as President Barack Obama prepares to outline new proposals to protect the country's internet systems from cybersecurity threats.
We're back live here on set at Fresh Outlook. I am joined by the Ebru think tank, Dr. Jose Lopez of Seton Hall University, Dr. Yohuru Williams from Fairfield University, and joining us via Skype is Baron Soka from Tech Freedoms. He'll be joining us from D.C. Let me begin with you, Jose. What's your reaction to U.S. Central Command, basically the American military hacked by ISIS?
I mean, when I first saw this, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was somebody had put out The Onion or somebody was putting out this report. The fact that they had a Facebook page and a Twitter page and a YouTube site, I was really surprised by that, and I would not categorize this as a hack. It was funny. That's the way I saw it.
Well, it's strange. They had a pin interest page as well. It was like missiles I want, neutron bombs I want. No, I'm only kidding. They don't have a pin interest page as far as I know. Yohuru, what's your reaction to this?
Same reaction as Jose. I think it's unfortunate in this context that the United States government is operating this page, that Americans are exposed to it, many for the first time in this hacking incident, which is clearly a prank. Certainly no classified information was leaked. Nothing dangerous occurred as a result. But it's embarrassing, and certainly while the president's giving an address about cybersecurity, doesn't look good at all.
Jose, when I look at this, it's sort of like they slapped us in the face, saying, look how easy we can hack into your systems.
And it's not even really a hack. These guys are studying very closely who's responsible for these sites and who's responsible for putting up information. And then they basically just guessed at the passwords. So, and as we know, like any account, you put in a password and then they ask you a question and you have to come up. They study these people very carefully, and then they're basically just guessing. So, I mean, that is the low-level hacking that they're doing. But it's amazing to me that this even happened.
And the password, of course, was password.
Probably.
Which is always a password,
Probably.
password to have. Just kidding about that as well. The serious side of this, Yohuru, is that the names and addresses of U.S. military generals were released. So if there are some people who have bad intentions out there, and we know there are, they could take actions against those folks.
They could not, and I think that makes people uncomfortable. But at the same time, a lot of that was open source material. That would not be difficult to come by using a different process. So the things that they posted in some sense indicate their ability to do this. And I agree with Jose that it is a hack, and we should be concerned about the potential for something greater at a greater level. But the things that they released ultimately weren't that critical. And again, they would have been able to get that through open sources.
I mean, these are social media sites. I mean, this was not the U.S. Army's Central Command database where the strategies of that they're putting, where they have soldiers on the ground and where they have positions and what their long-term strategies. This wasn't a Pentagon they hacked. This was a social media site.
Right.
And unfortunately, all of our information now is available. It's very easy to get anyone's information on Google or various other sites. So again, if someone were really dedicated to finding out the information about the general's addresses, that would be easy to come by, easy enough to come by.
But this is a wake-up call that if they can hack our social networks, they might be able to go a step or two or 1,000 steps farther.
That's the concern, and we're looking at this in the context of the Sony breach. Now, that's a serious breach. The Target breach, those are serious breaches, and I think that's what the president meant to address. To have this group target CENTCOM at this time indicates we've got a lot to be concerned about, and we should be thinking more proactively, and it's really a clarion call for the Obama administration, whoever comes in next, to really be concerned about this, and especially with regard to the U.S. government.
And President Obama actually had a little egg on his face because he was lecturing businesses that they need to get their acts together when it comes to cybersecurity.
And it happened exactly when he was doing that. It was just like central casting, almost like it was choreographed that way to happen. But I mean, I think what we need to further realize about all of this is that this is the future. Cybersecurity and cyber hacking and cyber terrorism is where it's at right now. This is where terrorism is going. It's in this direction. I mean, there are some reports, I've read some of these NSA reports out there that the National Security Agency has put out, that there's literally a hack on US government websites every 3 seconds happening. So those, they're not penetrating, they're penetrating stuff like this, social media sites, which I'm not overly worried about.
So we are winning the war right now against cyber terrorism because the attacks are taking place and they failed to take down the power grids. They failed to impact the water supply, our traffic signals, our banking system. They could literally cripple America with a proper hack, right?
This isn't the catastrophic Matthew Broderick doomsday scenario from War Games from the early 80s. But what it is a wake-up call. People were concerned about Y2K, for example, and our computers make us vulnerable. These systems make us vulnerable. To what extent are we going beyond what is necessary? What protocols are necessary to ensure the safety and security, not just of my social security number, but our infrastructure, our electrical grid, so on and so forth. And I think that's what really concerns people at this moment. Are we doing what's necessary to secure those systems?
Absolutely.
Are we doing enough?
Absolutely. I mean, that is a key question. I mean, businesses seem to be, that's the private sector, but the public sector is really doing, there's a tremendous investment. The NSA just in Washington, in that local area, is over 10,000 employees. This is their job. This is what they're doing every day. They're protecting the U.S. government sites and stuff like, and taking care of our infrastructure. I mean, if there is a breach of infrastructure, electricity, just electricity alone will cripple a country. There are reports out there, these doomsday reports, that if the electrical grid is knocked out throughout the country, it's a matter of months before we're in complete chaos here. And the terrorists are aware of this stuff. They're reading all this stuff. They're just as, all this stuff is out there in the public domain, so they're reading what we're reading.
Do you think these guys were actually ISIS members or guys living in their mother's basement somewhere who decided to pretend like they're ISIS and make these hacks?
That's the problem with a lot of this, is that whether we're talking about state-sponsored terror or individuals who are operating for some other purpose, this could have been extortion. I mean, this has happened in other countries. It's happened here with certain scams where people demand money in order to release your personal information on your computer. They're both forms of terror. Sony was terrorism because it compromised relationships at the company at the highest levels. So we have to think concretely about, number one, redefining what we mean by terror in the 21st century, right? And then secondly, how we're going to proceed so that we're not only securing our infrastructure, but thinking concretely about what the next threat is, 2 steps ahead.
I mean, there's still unconfirmed reports of who's done this for the U.S. Central Command. There is one report out there that it's star-crossed lovers. It's these 2 British citizens that have defected, left citizen. One of them is a 45-year-old woman. The other one is a 20-year-old gentleman. And they're living now in Syria, and they're sympathetic to the ISIS cause. And it's believed that they're responsible for this. At least they've been claiming this. It's still not it's not confirmed yet at this point. But what scares me the most, and when I read that, when I was looking into this information, is that this seems to be a lot of homebred. I mean, these are British bred, but homebred terrorism going on. If you look at Charlie Hebdo, you look at the 2 brothers there, and all of the terrorists that they grew up in France, native speakers. You look at the Boston bombers, grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. If you go back and you look at the Oklahoma bombing, that was also domestic-born terrorists. And that's, if you kind of follow this pattern, that's the scariest thing to me. Regardless of hacking and all of those other things, that the fact that these guys are growing up here, these men and women are growing up in Western countries, in France, England, the United States, and that somehow something is changing them and causing a switch to go off, that they would do stuff like this, That's what really scares the heck out of me.
Add to that very quickly that we've always been concerned about the sleeper agent, but now the thing that they actually attack, YouTube and Twitter, are the very vehicles by which a lot of that propaganda is spread, which helps to radicalize some of these individuals. And people have talked about the internet and social media. We look at the Arab Spring, it can have positive benefits, but sometimes those benefits can be very negative in spreading messages of hate and violence and terror.
Absolutely, and in our culture, we're oversharing in a sense. We've talked about this many times on Fresh Outlook, that our young people, our students at Fairfield University, Seton Hall, I see them constantly twittering and oversharing, in my opinion, this being my own personal opinion, a lot of things. And like you're saying, it's very easy to find out things about where people go to school, where they got their education. I mean, they could look at sites like LinkedIn and Facebook, and it makes it very easy, really, if you want to target someone.
Most people don't have bad intentions, though, because most people are putting all of this sensitive information out there that when I was growing up would have been unheard of. I mean,
Right.
every meal they eat
Right.
is Instagrammed. Every party they go to is on Facebook. Every job they have is on LinkedIn. I mean, you can literally, if you were a stalker and you had bad intentions, track down someone in a snap.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is information you're putting out there about your patterns. What you do, what you like, where you eat, when you do it, and this allows people who have bad intentions to figure out, okay, well, Logan's eating breakfast at 6 in the morning at Chunky E. Cheese. That's his favorite place.
Right.
You know, so it's information like that people don't realize. Even our government officials don't realize this, that there's folks that have bad intentions that are studying their habits.
And it's always been very valuable to businesses. A business would like to know the eating habits of Fairfield University students and where they're going to track. I think the concern is that a couple of years ago, you had the Obama administration and the president himself saying, we've got to limit what information that these companies can share. So all about data sharing. Now you've got the government actually demanding the ability to have access to some of that data to track terrorists. So you've got this kind of 360 that's happening and all these various issues that are conflicting with one another. And you've got an American public that sees a situation like this and is understandably concerned, but with good reason, because as you point out, their data is out there as well.
Right.
What have we learned from the Sony hack? Are there lessons learned other than that the left can be as racist as the right?
I'm going to defer to my colleague on that one.
Well, we know that's true. One thing we did learn from the Sony hack, and put the audience in on the joke, is that a number of higher-ups were making racist jokes about the President of the United States, implying that he could only enjoy movies that were black-themed.
Yeah, I meant to take that serious for just a second, you know, and joking with Jose, but at the end of the day, I think it was of concern because what we see is in all this conversation about a post-racial America, in those moments when people are comfortable and in those spaces that are cut off, we still have a tremendous problem. We saw this with the Donald Sterling case over the summer with race in this country. And so what it simply confirmed is what a lot of people already know, that polite society doesn't engage these issues, but behind the scenes, we've got a lot of work to do as a society.
And like I pointed out to you, you know, a lot of people point the fingers at so-called rednecks,
Right.
but the rednecks can even exist among the upper crust of Hollywood,
Absolutely.
as their attitudes seem to point to.
And these ISIS, I mean, they are really targeting the anger of young men mostly, but young people in general. And I mean, they've made comments on other media about the Michael Brown incident in Missouri and everything that's been going on there. And these are legitimate problems that we have as a culture, as a society, going on right now that they're tapping into.
I think part of the problem is that people today who are dissatisfied do have a lot of power to disrupt things.
Yep.
They can hack into a system because they're an expert at coding, for example.
If you look at the way our intelligence community is set up, the CIA, the FBI, the U.S. military, they're really set up for large things. They're set up. If you're the Pentagon, you're worried about North Korea. You're worried about Iran. You're worried about stuff like that. These are individual small cells in all over the world, in Paris and London and New York City, sitting around there, and they're not really set up to fight those kind of agencies, those kind of small cell groups. And that's the problem that we're really having. How do we secure our country when we're not fighting nations? at this point.
And just to add to that quickly, the idea of transparency now with the Sony hack, again, think about what just happened with the Oscars, where you don't get a film that's awarded. The complaint is you've got an industry that the voting is 96% white. And so now what Sony confirms is maybe there's a race problem within the entertainment industry in the way. But that information was once protected. Now that people have access to it, or at least it's dangled out there like a carrot that they can have access, there are a lot of people who are going to take the bait and try to pursue it because the dividends that they can reap are so high.
And I do think we learned some important lessons and some good lessons from the Sony hack for sure. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Martin Luther King and his celebration and observance on Monday after this.